Hello and welcome back to That's What He Said. When I was growing up, and today what we're going to talk about, I was never really told what to do. You have to do this, you have to do that. My parents always gave us, Josiah and I, a choice for one, and then they always told us and made sure we understood the why behind things. So today, I want to talk about the why behind it. So this is kind of referring to whether it was a rule, a decision, or something that was happening in the world around us, there was always a conversation that followed. Maybe that's hence why I am a yapper and I make videos where I talk for a living. Maybe, it could be, allegedly, who knows. But this taught us that, the world around us isn't black and white, that every action, reaction, response, every person, there's a why. And understanding someone's why behind something doesn't make you smarter, but it certainly makes you kinder and grow some empathy. So we're going to talk about that idea today. Now, I'm sure this will come as a surprise to many of you, but I remember growing up and looking at my dad or my mom or even Josiah, because he was already smart, out the womb, smarter than everyone ever, pretty much. Sorry, it just is what it is. That's what I think. That's my take. But I was the kind of kid who would ask, why is the sky blue? Or why do people fight? And I was always asking the why behind things because I have this desire, this very deep desire in me, and I'm sure many of you do too, of I just want to know about people. I want to know things. I want to understand. I have such a desire to be intimate in knowing somebody, in that empathy that I've always kind of been like that. Instead of shutting me down like many parents would have, many people would have, I just got answers. My parents encouraged it. They modeled that same openness and curiosity in how they talk to us. I guess a good example would be, instead of saying, don't do this or don't do that when we got in trouble, they would say and kind of pose it as a question do you know why that hurt somebody? Or do you understand why that matters? So on and so forth. It wasn't about being correct. It wasn't about being right. It was about being aware. They wanted us to grow up thinking critically, feeling deeply, and seeing people as whole stories instead of quick judgments. When I get to listen to an audiobook even, or a podcast, or my friends on the phone, the voice notes they send me, the videos on Snapchat, whatever it may be, I see that as an opportunity to really know somebody. I see that as a look into their soul, and I think what a privilege it is to know people and to love people deeply instead of judging, because that takes energy. Judgment takes energy. Being open and curious feels natural, especially when you train that muscle. As I've gotten older, I realize how much that has shaped the way I see the world, my personality, my subconscious thinking. I think that simple question, why, changes everything. And I know my dad, obviously, I've talked about, and actually I can try to reference that video, but whatever side it's on. But I've talked about having a why, setting a why for yourself, knowing why you do the things that you do. And I know my why is to help people. I would consider myself an altruist. That's what my predictive index PI personality thing is called. And I would say it's very accurate because that's my motivator. Helping people helps me feel like I'm doing what I enjoy. I'm living in my genius. And I think I know my why because I used to ask those questions of, why do we do this? Why do people do that? Why do they think like this? And asking the why, when someone cuts you off in traffic, instead of reacting, you can pause and think, why might they be in such a hurry? I think it's called sondering, actually, is the term for it. And that's looking at somebody's life and thinking about what do they do in their life, or being curious about what their life looks like day to day. And it could even be something like if a friend snaps at you or they're not texting you, why are they hurting? Or when life feels unfair, you can wonder, why might this be happening? What is this teaching me? Is this teaching me about something, someone, etc.? The why doesn't excuse behavior, obviously, but it gives you the empathy. It helps you see beyond the moment into rationale, and it helps you stay a lot calmer and a lot more collected, so I've learned, because that is not a strong suit of mine, but a skill I'm learning and continuing to grow in. And I do have to thank my boyfriend for that too, because he's like the most even keeled, my brake pedal, and I am a go, go, go person. And I've really learned that peace, my word this year, it takes that. It takes stepping back, learning that, the why behind something might not be a right away answer either. But ask the question. Start with the question, and you can always come back when you have the answer. But doesn't excuse the behavior. It gives you the empathy to handle it. My family has talked a lot about emotional intelligence throughout the year, and I have continued to watch myself grow in this. Obviously, I'm nowhere near where I should be or where I want to be, but I think the emotional intelligence behind the why has helped me kind of grow into the person I'm continuing to grow into today. And I look back at how my parents parented, and it shows me a lot about emotional mastery. Even if I didn't realize it at the time, they were helping Josiah and I regulate through this empathetic mindset, and they were helping us reflect and respond with intention. When you understand the why, you stop taking everything so personally. You stop assuming the worst. You think, what's the best that could happen? And you start leading with curiosity instead of criticism. And we don't get very far with criticism, do we? We get far with curiosity. That's how we learn about people. And it doesn't just change how you see others, it changes how you see yourself. You begin to ask yourself, like, why do I do that? Why did I do that? Or when I react a certain way, like I always ask, like, why did I react that way? What is this bringing up for me? I try to stay open and curious with myself, because oftentimes I can be really, really, really hard on myself and really empathetic to others. And so I've been working on holding certain beliefs that are more positive about myself. And I think that's where my growth is happening. I think learning to ask the why, not just outwardly, but inwardly, is just as important. I think too, in relationships, the why is everything. It's the difference between arguing and understanding. And my dad talks a lot about reacting versus responding. And that's a big part of it. When we have that empathy muscle, when we work on that emotional intelligence piece, we're asking the why outwardly and inwardly, we're able to respond. And that means, we have these two emotions, or these two, I would say, like default settings. We have fear and we have love. So when you have those two, that's also reacting and responding. Our goal is to be the love, responding, empathy side, but we're naturally sometimes competitive, judgmental, and reactionary. So how do we change that? We have to ask the why. We have to continue working that muscle, because if we want healthy relationships, that why and that curiosity is everything. When you care enough to ask why, like why do they think that way? Why do they need that reassurance? Why does this matter so much to them? You're showing love on a deeper, more personal level. I think that's something that my dad, actually both my parents and Josiah, have modeled, that, slowing down long enough to understand before responding is crucial. It's so important, because then you actually get your point across too. So now it's a productive, more healthy, more regulated response, instead of being reactionary, hurtful, and definitely not helpful. That approach alone has kind of changed the way I communicate with my friends, my boyfriend, and even mainly myself, which I know sounds kind of funny, but it's taught me that compassion starts with curiosity. And I am a person who thinks thoughts, sometimes they're really awful, sometimes they're kind of good, but I really have been trying to be curious about the things that I think, the way that I act, the things that I do, and how that impacts other people and myself. And I would encourage you too to ask yourself the why. Like I got upset about something the other day, and I was like, why am I upset? What is the point of this? And as much as that, I know that kind of sounds judgmental, it's a work in progress. But I've been kind of learning to look at myself and be like, you're also a person. Learning, growing, it's your first time living. Like, let's figure this out. Let's be a team together. My right and left brain, let's be a team. Let's understand the why behind the way that I act. And I think that has been such a crucial part of becoming the faith that I want to be, becoming the best version of yourself, as Matthew Kelly calls it. So now when I find myself frustrated, confused, maybe even overwhelmed, I always come back to what my parents taught me. Ask the why. Understanding the why helps you lead with empathy instead of ego, and it helps you see the person fully behind their problem. It helps you live with patience and grace and wisdom, and I think we all could use those 3 things a lot more than we have them now. I am saying that because I need them more than I have them now. My parents didn't just raise us to follow rules, and in fact, it really wasn't rules that we followed, but it was understanding life around us. And I think that's a gift that I will always cherish and that I want to instill in my kids, and I hope that you guys take this as kind of a moment to say, am I asking the why? Am I being judgmental? What are my default settings? Are they fear? Are they love? Are they judgment? Are they reaction? Are they responding? What are your default settings? And why are they your default settings? Take some time to ask yourself the why. Take some time to ask the people around you the why, internally, outwardly, whatever it may be. The best thing you can do to really love somebody is to try to understand them. I will spend the rest of my life trying to understand my parents, my brother, my boyfriend, my friends, because I know that I love them and I don't want to waste a single minute not loving them well and not continuing to grow and ask that why question. Asking why opens the door to empathy, self-awareness, and deeper understanding. So I would encourage you this week, when frustration arises, and it might, pause and ask why, just once, and see how it changes the moment. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you next week on That's What He Said.